Side B begins with Evil Walks, and it's hard on guitar chords and tapping of cymbals before going into a sweet rocker of a track. The lyrics in question deal with interesting metaphors for evil people, seducers and predators and all, with their black shadows hanging over your shoulder and black mark up against your name. And the worst part is that it's permanent marker, so you can never get it off. The chorus itself is pretty good and is a catchy hook in and of itself, while addressing such evil people and how they would pretend to be trustful and are much closer than you expect. Evil walks behind you, sleeps beside you, and talks arouse you. But if you're lucky though, evil might also do all the cooking and washing for you. So, all in all, Evil Walks is basically a femme fatale kind of song, cautioning about those who may wish to take advantage of you simply for their own gain. So you better watch out and think twice about who you may be walking beside and who may be walking behind you. Next is COD. Now what does COD stand for exactly? I don't know, Call of Duty maybe? No, actually in the chorus itself, it refers to care of devil or care of the devil in me. Most like, obviously a metaphorical devil as opposed to a literal one, referring to something like, say, a disease transferred from someone, or even our most primal urges, our darkest desires and impulses made manifest. A good chunk of the verses also have other interesting meanings to the acronym, such as call of a dog, cream of a dream, call of the doctor, cash on demand, crime of the day, and call of the dove, which is something I think is interesting to say the least. Another thing worth noting is that this is among the few AC/DC songs to have an actual swear word in the lyrics. In this case, it's the B word, although in this context, it most likely refers to a female hound or dog at least. There's also a bit of a callback, which may or may not be intentional, to a previous song on the album, Put the Finger on You, with the verse, if you give them the finger, they'll take off your hand, which probably refers to your classic phrase of biting the hand that feeds you. It also mentions the curse of love and how it's the cause of pain, likely alluding to heartbreak and the very challenging commitment that may come in a sexual and romantic relationship, which is something that AC/DC tend to delve into from time to time in their songs and lyrical contents. And honestly, with all that said, I do wish to see other bands do songs named out of acronyms and have said acronyms be woven in various ways in the lyrics themselves. After that is Breaking the Rules. Again, not to be confused with Breaking the Law by Judas Priest, although they're both equally awesome bands and songs in my opinion. A groovy track whose lyrics may seem to be about nothing but, well, breaking rules. It mentions outcasts of society like Black Sheep and a renegade with hot feet in the cool of the shade, and how they got crowbars and hot-wired cars, and they're called sneaky thieves and they're cheap cigars. Now, if those cigars were expensive, then they wouldn't be so bad. Anyways, the chorus itself seems to further support this theme, with the simple lines of, just keep on breaking the rules, and come on get ready to rule. However, there may be another, more underlining theme here. The line of get ready to rule could also refer to taking over the position of boss or command or whatnot. And the vocalist himself, Brian Johnson, mentions the regulation fools and their regulation rules and how they've got the regulation ties and regulation shoes. So have they also got regulation gloves or regulation parka jackets or regulation forum websites or regulation social media. Anyway, he goes on to call them out as such, being fools of regulations with regulation rules, and he says he's gonna do things his own way every day, and he ain't gonna pay no attention to their rules. So a double negative. So he is gonna pay attention to their rules or not? In a way, rule breakers, or those who break the rules, can also refer to those who don't literally break the law or anything, but rather those who innovate and think out of the box, not just in music, but also try to kind of break boundaries and limits on what one could do in their jobs or occupations or anything artistic for that matter. As they say, rules sometimes are made and meant to be broken. It can have a positive result as much as negative. It just kind of depends on the intention of the individual and what they wish to do. And in a way, it's because of certain rule breakers that we have a lot of great music today, such as AC/DC. And this is also one of those songs, one of their several songs from AC/DC that end with a fade out, which may not be bad on the surface, although I usually prefer songs that have a proper ending and climax, although since this one is slightly more subdued compared to the other tracks in the album, I'm not as bothered in this case. Then there's Night of the Long Knives. Again, on the surface, this may seem pretty simple. The verse is asking a lot of who's and where's, such as who's your leader, who's your man, where's that savior, so on and so forth, while the chorus itself repeats the phrase of it's the night of the long knives. However, when you actually look up the term itself and consider the context of some of the verses here, there might be something else here, and it's something I wouldn't want to tread lightly. You see, Night of the Long Knives refers to an event in 1934 where a certain chancellor ordered the purge and execution of political opponents to ensure his position of power and overall supremacy. And that chancellor's name happens to be Adolf Hitler. Yes, that Hitler. With that in mind, the lyric of stab him in the back could very well refer to Adolf himself stabbing the backs of many people in his rise to power. Now, I want to make it clear that I absolutely do not condone Nazism in any way, shape or form possible. And I'm very sure the members of AC/DC don't either. They probably discovered the term somewhere, not knowing its origin and meaning, thought it sounded cool and used it in a song. Now, Night of the Long Knives could also refer to something slightly more recent. In 1962, then British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan commenced a reshuffling of the cabinet by dismissing 7 members altogether entirely. Since most of the members of AC/DC happened to be from Britain in some way, Brian Johnson and bassist Cliff Williams from England, and Malcolm and Angus Young from Glasgow, Scotland, it's likely they're referring to that, but I can't confirm it for sure. Now, if only Captain America was created 7 years earlier, he would have been able to punch Hitler before that purge. So in short, simple, decent, and all-around bright song, dark implications. And so that brings us to the last song of the album, Spellbound. Thankfully, this one isn't as uncomfortable as the previous song, but its lyrics are still quite grim nonetheless. Each of the verses deal with a particular person going through some kind of accident or bad luck, with the choruses in between saying how their worlds keep tumbling down and all that. The first verse is about someone who ends up in a car crash of sorts, shattered by the windscreen, stunned by the whiplash, he can do nothing and never sleeps at night. Though, if he does sleep, he at least dream while he sleeps. Then the second verse is about someone who gets beaten by a blind man, but up a dead end and all. So, he was attacked by Matt Murdock as Daredevil? And in the third and last verse is about someone who slid and slipped on an oil slick and got their hands set on fire. And all these sound pretty painful, and the verses and Brian's vocals really do demonstrate that. Though I guess I'd much rather be beaten by a blind person than be in a car crash or be covered in oily fire. At least then I'd be able to live and escape and survive. Anyway, the three verses end with the lines of, I can do nothing right, can't even sleep at night, my feet have left the ground, I'm spinning round and round. Which could mean that the accidents are the results of their carelessness, never really doing anything right and all. Regardless though, this is a great song to go out on for an album like this. It's probably one of the more underrated songs in my opinion, and it's a shame really because as good as many of the popular songs are, like You Shook Me All Night Long, Back in Black, Highway to Hell, Long Way to the Top are, I do like to give some of their lesser known songs like this some good attention and appreciation. Any and every song of theirs does at least deserve some kind of attention and listening to. And the chorus hook itself is one that really sticks with me since I first heard it. And it's one I would hum in my head any day. And sure, the verses are a tad slow, but that makes it worthwhile when listening to the choruses. And like I said, it's a worthy closer to the album. And all in all, for those about to rock, we salute you, is a fantastic album by AC/DC, and that's saying a lot. Any album of theirs could be considered masterpieces, and something like this is no exception. Songs are catchy, the riffs are hard and yet also energetic. Brian's vocals are almost borderline operatic, and the guitars of Angus and Malcolm, brilliant. Although, if there was one thing I would nitpick, it would be some of the packaging here. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that even though it's technically a single album, it's a gatefold, and here you can see each of the individual members on a stage, and it looks beautiful. If I had a poster of this, I'd hang it on my wall without any hesitation. So that's good in and of itself. But one problem I have with the cover, or at least the back cover, is the track listing. They swapped around some of the various songs, and sure, if you look at the actual vinyl itself, it has the correct listing, but this packaging here, it kind of swapped it around for some reason. And considering how, well, chronologically confusing AC/DC's albums can be, especially the early 70s and 80s ones, this really does not help. But that's just a nitpick of mine. But aside from all that, the album is still fantastic, and it would be a great addition to any collection of hard rock and heavy metal album collection. If you're a big fan of those kind of hard rocking bands, if you're a big fan of AC/DC, or you just like to hear some fun, energetic rock music, I say give this album a whirl. You will not regret it. And sure, while I said it's not exactly a consistent track listing, what's consistent is the music. In nearly half a century, this sound remains mostly the same. And in a case like this, it works. When you listen to a song or album by AC/DC, you know what you're getting. And that's why I don't need to think twice about the more recent albums such as Rockleburst and Power Up, the latter of which came out just last year, proving that they're still standing strong to this day. Rock on, AC/DC, rock on. Next time, though, is beginning of the season of giving and December and Christmas. So, I like to give you lots special. Next week, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the debut album of the Electric Light Orchestra. My mistress.
Report.
I've received word that in the contest of champions, the champion they call Billy Tor has been defeated by the warrior they call Linkara.
Interesting revelation there. He will be a good potential asset to our plans, alongside Heavy Rex and Levidian Skarn. Have you been able to find the one they call Mechakara?
Unfortunately, so far, no. He is still at large and still nowhere to be found, even after over 3 Earth years. He's practically invisible by now.
Need not to worry, my dear. Even if we don't find him sooner, someday, some year, he'll be forced himself to come forth, to make his presence known once more.
Whatever hides from the light comes out in the dark.
Very true, my child.
And what of Silverwolf and Crocodile?
Don't worry on having to compete with them. Soon, they'll be cooperating with us. But for now, they're being dealt with by some council personally. For now, though, you keep your close, watchful eyes on the Story Watcher, and someday you and he will face each other for your first time. That I have promised you. I keep promises.
Thank you, my master.
All before you had come and failed. Lord Vice, the King of Worms, the Missing Number, all brethrens who claim themselves to be much more than I. And most of them true. But as an inner god, I will be greater than any of them ever would, or ever could. I promise you this, your time will come. You will be able to become the greater being, my crystal child.
Indeed, I shall face the Story Watcher. Over and out.